Okay, we are live. Hello, YouTube. And I know you guys we're usually here for David Crowley, but tonight we are here with Christopher Micklos, and he has written a horror novel. And as you know, I will be publishing my own book here pretty soon, and I love anything that has to do with books. And I know a lot of my reviews were on romance and dark romance novels, but I love horror too. Anything horror. I don't care if it goes from the B reels all the way up to Stephen King and beyond. I love them all. Um, I'm sorry. What? Show a comment. Uh, Ping Stanton. Well, hello, Matthews. Thank you for joining us. I think he will probably tell us why ticks here in just a minute. But Christopher, why don't you introduce yourself and then kind of let us know a little bit more about you?
Sure, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. As I said, my name is Christopher Micklos, and I'm a Wisconsin-based filmmaker and author. And my first film it was a horror film, indie, uh, small micro-budget indie horror film called The Nursery. It came out in 2018. You can find it anywhere you get your streaming movies. My second movie came out in 2023. It's called The Headmistress. And when I finished up those projects, I had just been starting to write fiction, short fiction, kind of having some fun with that. And I kind of wanted to write a novel. I don't know how deep you want me to go at this point, but we I read a few years ago. I read a book called Paperbacks from Hell, which was it was by Will Erickson and Grady Hendrix, and it's kind of a survey of 1970s and 80s pulp horror paperbacks, and it just kind of goes through the history of them and kind of the gonzo nature of them, and I was so taken with with the idea of pulp horror and just kind of how crazy and fun these books were. I started reading them, and I completely fell in love with the genre. And so when I decided it was time to write my novel, I decided I wanted to do something in that realm. And so that's where Tick Down came from.
Yeah, and Matthew was asking, what brought you to the subject of a tick? I mean, I loved it. I went and I looked at your cover and everything in your book on Amazon. And for those of you who are wondering, there's a link down below in the description to the Amazon account where you can purchase Christopher's book. But why ticks? I mean, I thought it was hilarious. I thought that was pretty ingenious.
Well, thank you very much. So the book is very much inspired by of those 70s and 80s paperbacks, very much so the animal attack or creature feature kind of books. In particular, there's one that I really fell in love with called The Night of the Crabs by Guyan Smith, and it's about giant crabs terrorizing the Welsh countryside, and it was very reminiscent of the old science fiction horror movies I used to love from the 50s and 60s, like Them, the giant ant classic, and Night of the Lepus, and all those from that era. And so I kind of decided, well, that's what I want to write. I want to write something that's a creature feature, kind of an animal attacks. Big bugs or big animals would be great. And I started kind of looking at what was out there. And there's a lot with ants, there's a lot with bees, there's a lot of crabs, and
Spiders.
I started
One of my
lots. Yeah, absolutely, lots and lots of spider stuff. But I wasn't really seeing much on ticks. And as I mentioned, I'm located here in Wisconsin, and ticks are a serious problem in Wisconsin, especially as you go north. You find your ticks in your dogs, and you get them on your skin, and they're without even knowing much about them, they're pretty gross and horrible. But when I started kind of doing my research and looking at photos and close-ups, I mean, these are awful, awful, awful things. They're just fearsome looking, creatures with these like terrible mouth parts and these, they're not really mandibles, but they're like mandibles, and it's they're just terrible. And that's when they're a couple
Little.
millimeters big. And in mine are giant mutant ticks. And so I thought, you take these little things that are horrible and you blow them up to the size of your couch, or sometimes even bigger than that.
An
It probably would
SUV.
make for horror. Yeah, yeah, it would probably make for good horror. And so um, so that's what I did. I sat down, wrote Tick Town. It takes place in a rural Wisconsin tourist town, and so I got to write a lot about kind of the area that I know about, and got to learn a lot about these horrible creatures.
That, I mean, I'm going to be getting your book because I mean I love that type of genre. There's a movie and it's like a B movie. I love the B horror movies. There's just something about
Sure.
them. They're so fun. And it had to do with like giant spiders. And that's just, when I saw your
Yeah.
book, I'm like going, oh, and it was just so funny. I mean, it's kind of like the shark movies, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love
Absolutely.
shark movies.
Um,
And
there's definitely I like to say that Ticktown is kind of the unholy love child of Them from 1954 and Night of the Crabs, so a movie and a book. But there's definitely some Jaws in its DNA. It definitely has a little bit of Jaws in its
oh, that'll be great. Oh my gosh. I
DNA.
don't know. I thought it was just a really neat and unique topic.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, how were you able, because we were talking before we got on here, what was your process in order to get, do you have an agent or a publisher? I'm sorry, I forgot which one.
I have a literary agent and a traditional publisher. So I started with the agent, and together we found a publisher.
And was it hard? How many times did you have to query? And a lot of people, as you know, the struggle is real. It's hard for a lot of people to get their foot into the door.
Yeah, well, it's actually I love telling the story because um, it's kind of a hopeful story. But I'll start with I've for the last many of the last 7, 8, 9 years I've been writing spec screenplays. I've got my own movies that I've produced. Excuse me, but I've also been writing and trying to sell spec screenplays, and it's a very similar process. You write your screenplay, you query to literary managers, more so managers than agents in that field, or producers. And so I've written maybe a half dozen scripts. I've queried hundreds and hundreds of producers and managers, and I've had varying degrees of success as far as feedback and all that. But no one's represented me, and no one's bought my scripts. So I went into the whole novel querying process with my eyes wide open, because everything that I read and interacted with social media groups and stuff, they say it's very much the same. You can query hundreds and hundreds of agents, um, and it might take years to find someone. And so you go in with your eyes open. And so I sat down, and somewhere, I can't remember where, but I read some advice that said when you're first sitting down to query agents, don't send out 50 queries, send out like maybe a half dozen or a dozen, so that if you've done something horribly wrong, they can tell you. Someone might respond and tell you, and then you can adjust your approach. So last February, February of 2024, I sat down and I kind of started the process of trying to find an agent. I wrote my query. I got all my materials together. Sat down literally on a Tuesday. I queried 6 agents and I queried 6 publishers, small press publishers that accepted books from non-agented writers, and sent them off and kind of went about my day. That afternoon, an agent named Mark Falcon of Falcon Literary responded. I had sent like a first chapter. And he said, "Hey, I like this. I'd love to see the rest of the manuscript." Sent him the manuscript. My wife and my daughter and I were traveling the next week, so we were flying down to Florida the next Monday. The plane landed. I opened up my phone, my email, and I had a message from Mark saying, "I love this. I want to represent it. Let's talk as soon as we can." So went over to my in-laws and got on the Zoom with them, and we hit it off, and And then I subsequently got some offers from those first queries I sent out too. But I you know, I tell that story and it almost sounds arrogant. It's like, oh, it took me, no time at all to find. But what I realized and what I learned later too was that it's just, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw.
Yep.
You hit the right person at the right time, and it might take hundreds and it might take a few. But Mark told me sometime later, I can't remember, if it was maybe a month later. He didn't tell me on our first call, but he said, it's funny that morning that you sent me the query. I was reading an article in the New York Times about pulp horror, and then you sent me an email that said Ticktown, a pulp horror novel in the subject line. So it caught my eye, and I read it, and it was exactly what I was looking for. So I got super lucky. I happened to get the right guy at the right time, um, and I have no problem being lucky. I'll take the luck where you can find it.
Oh, heck yeah, that's amazing, actually. I mean, that's kind of like what they say, kismet. It was meant to be, when things fall, when the stars align, you got to take it and run,
You do.
and
I will. I will also say, if I just
uh,
the little coda into the story as well is one of I had looked at some resources about the agents I was querying, and one of the things he had cited in his things he likes was Jaws, and I thought, oh, this is kind of like a land version of Jaws, very loosely. But I didn't realize at the time that I queried him, when I found out later, that he doesn't just like Jaws. He actually was representing the 50th anniversary re-release of Peter Benchley's Jaws. And
wow.
so, of course, at first I was like, oh my God, I wonder if, even if he doesn't sign me, I wonder if Peter Benchley is going to read my book. And then I realized he was passed away, and I felt like an idiot. But but it was still pretty cool that
Yeah.
someone who was representing such a giant in the industry. I was like, hey, I'll dine out on that for as long as I can.
That's amazing. I mean, that's super big. Now, when it came to your book cover, I mean, that's what caught my eye, is I loved the cover of your book. Now, did you design that, or did the publisher help design that?
Well, it was actually very much a collaboration, and I appreciate that because I absolutely love the cover, and I think it's a real asset to the book. Um, when we talked to various publishers, and he we got a handful of good offers. But when we sat down with Castlebridge Media, who ended up publishing the book, I I told them, I said, this is a pulp horror novel. It's very much influenced by those 70s and 80s paperbacks. And I'm really, really going to want to cover that is reminiscent of those books. And I said that, and I think not only do I want that, but I think it's going to be critical to the success of the book, because that's what I read, and I know that's what I look for when I'm scrolling or when I'm in the bookstore. I'm looking for like a monster on the cover, and I love that stuff. Um, and so my publisher, basically said, "Well, why don't you send us, what you had in mind?" And so I went out and I found about a dozen examples of those covers, and then I went and I looked at those 50s and 60s movies, and I found, maybe a dozen posters from those movies, like them and some of those others, giant spider invasion and stuff like that. And I sent them those covers, and they were like, "Yeah, we're right in line with that." And so they did some work on it. I went out and found an artist who could do the monster itself, and then we kind of put it all together. And Introlio, who's one of the owners of Castlebridge Media, he did the final design, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. I was so dumbfoundedly happy when I saw the cover. And in fact, now when I share it, like when I first shared it, and on some of my marketing material, I'll put the poster from them, and then I'll put the book cover from Guy Smith's Night of the Crabs, and then I put mine in the middle, and I say, "This is exactly what you're going to get. It's going to be these two things."
Yeah, and hi, Greg. Thank you for joining. You are amazing. Um, yeah, and it's like you were saying, it's good that you're writing this type of novel, because I the kids today need to experience the novels from the 70s, because they need that kind of fun, crazy, just total. made up world, but still it's still horror. It's horror in a different way that they're used to. They're used to blood and guts and, you know, being chased down by chainsaws, and it's like, no, there's more to the genre than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and even, I am not one of those kids today. I'm very much not a kid. But I honestly, I've read a lot of horror, but one of my favorite authors is Richard Matheson. I love his work. But there were these books that existed that I just had no idea existed, and some of, like I said, the gonzo nature of some of them that were like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of these, and they're just so much fun. I mean, they're not particularly deep, and they're not particularly, there aren't a lot of political overtones and so much. They're just like straightforward, propulsive fun. And when I sat down, that's what I wanted to write.
And that's really, I think, what's missing in a lot of books these days, even in, the romance novels, because I've been reading a lot of those lately. A friend of mine, she got me, she's like, here, read this, and then I got hooked. But everything seems to have a political bent to them. And it's like, I'm not reading to get somebody's political ideology. I don't care. Think what you want to think, do what you want to do, but I don't want to read it in a story. So it's
Sure,
nice
sure.
to know that, you're kind of leaving that out.
So, I mean, it's funny because my background is politics. For 20 years, I owned a media consulting firm that primarily did uh, worked for candidates and candidate media and advocacy media and that sort of thing. So I very much have a background that I'm still very passionate about that stuff. Um, but this was not the place for it. This is not where I wanted it. And in fact, I would say 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had some friends over that we hadn't seen in some time, and they were asking me about the book. And they were kind of laughing at the premise and the giant ticks because they live more north of here, and my friend was saying, well, so the ticks, is it all tied up in global warming, and what are the political overtones? What are you trying to get at? I was like, nothing. There are no political overtones. I was like, if someone wants to read that in the book, that's fine. But I wanted giant ticks biting people in half and jabbing their mouth parts in their chests and sucking up the blood. That's all that it's about.
Maybe well, okay, we'll give your friend the benefit of the doubt because, even back then, back in the day, it's like sometimes if I'm remembering, I can't remember which movie it was. It was a B movie. Like I said, I love B movies. But it's some animal, probably some insect, but like it was like a nuclear plant exploded or something and then mutated the insects,
Right.
so then they came after them.
Well, I mean, a lot of those movies back then, they very much played into that fear of nuclear power. The movie I mentioned, them with the giant ants. The idea was that this is all happening, where they first tested the atomic bomb and all that. And so, I mean, there's definitely always been that, but I don't really believe that the makers of them were out to make a political point.
Yeah.
They were just thinking this is scary. It's something that people don't understand, and we're going to kind of use that as the doorway to giant ants, and then you read into it whatever you want. And there was just so much of that it kind of became a thing in that era. But I don't believe that any of those filmmakers were setting out to make a political.
Yeah, and I agree because when as writers, you're like going, okay, what could cause these things to get so big? Well,
Right,
maybe nuclear waste would, mutate them, so we'll make something blow up.
right.
Gosh, and I'm just so let's see. Sorry, I want to get some of these comments up here. Oh, okay. Greg wants to know what your view on Stephen King is.
What I've read of Stephen King, I really like. I have not read a lot of King. I'd say his favorite novel of mine is Salem's Lot. Which is just a wonderful, wonderful story. Um, Actually, what I've read most of King that I love the most is he has this wonderful, wonderful book called On Writing, which he just kind of it's more of a
Yep.
nonfiction kind of the life of the writer and the things you should do to be a writer. It's a fantastic book. So I love On Writing. He's got another great book called Danse Macabre, which is it's like basically about horror. It's just kind of about horror movies and horror books and kind of his look back on the stuff that influenced him and that he loves. So I love those. And his fiction, what I've been exposed to, I like, but my my own sort of druthers tends to be um, more fast paced, more pulpy, that sort of writing. I mentioned Richard Matheson. He's not really considered a pulp writer, but he very much, writes in that kind of cinematic style. He not only wrote books and short stories, he wrote like Hell House and The Incredible Shrinking Man and the I Am Legend. Those are his. And he also wrote a lot of short fiction, but he also wrote a ton of movies and TV shows and stuff. So I kind of like that style, the cinematic style. So that's what I like.
Okay, Greg. Okay, if he's into UFOs, check out Dreamcatcher. What is Dreamcatcher, Mr. Fernandez? I'm gonna make you right now. Get to typing, dude.
Yeah, see.
Yeah, he says ticks freak me out. Yeah, well, it's like you said when we were younger, I lived in Montana and Minnesota and all those other places, and ticks were prevalent up there. And you have to check. I'm sure at night everybody's checking each other for ticks, and it's like
Yeah,
found one.
completely. Yeah, or the dog goes out and he comes in, you're petting the dog, and you're like, oh, what is that I'm feeling? It's just awful. My daughter for the last several weeks has been convinced that she's got ticks in her hair, but I think it's just because I've had all these books laying around the house. So
Psychosomatic now.
yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
Stephen King books are Stephen King's books are slow, but they're more, I mean, they're horror, but they're also like um there's a lot of tension building
Oh yeah.
and suspense. That's the
Yeah.
word I'm thinking of. And yeah, I like Stephen King. I read a lot of his stuff. Okay, it's basic. Okay, thank you, Greg. It's basically about aliens and the government chasing them. They made a movie about it with Morgan Freeman. Trippy stuff. Okay, now I'm gonna have to go watch it.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
Nice. Love
Okay,
it.
and Matthew says his I Am Legend is yet to be made into a movie as good as the original book, even after 3 tries.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's often the case. But I mean, Matheson's writing is just so wonderful and so crisp, and especially, I mean, I like his novels, but his short fiction is phenomenal. His short fiction is absolutely beautiful. Um, so yeah. Anyway, I like his stuff.
And going back to the publishers and stuff, and I mean, I really am glad and super excited that you were able to find somebody so easily. And like I was telling you before, my journey has been so much harder, and it's like no matter who I queried, 9 times out of 10 there was never a response, but the ones who did are just like, well, this isn't a fit to what we're doing. And it wasn't until, like I was telling you, the editor, she just said, she goes, this is I like your book, I really like it, but you're just not going to find anybody to push it for you because they're not going to find it. So in that regard, I'm really glad that there is self-publishing, so there's somewhere for me to go, because
Sure.
that wasn't always the case.
Sure.
Either you had to go print it out at the local Xerox place, and or it just never saw the light of day, and now we can actually get books printed, so that's
Yeah.
nice. Now
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a different path to go down. Um, and I mean, with a small press, you end up doing a lot of the marketing and promotions and stuff on your own, just like you would with a self-published novel. Um, I'm the kind of person who, like, to some extent, needs some affirmation. Like, I don't know if I could put out a self-published novel because no one had said, "Hey, this is good enough to be published," until so I really kind of, when I first wrote Ticktown, I mean, honestly, you make the work, as as good as you can make it. You go through as many drafts as you feel is necessary. You get it to the point where you're like, oh, I think this is pretty good. But there's always that part of you, at least for me, that is like, well, yeah, well, I think it's good, but I don't know if anyone else is going to think it's good. And it's nice to have someone tell you it is, and then put their money where their mouth business. I mean, that's a
Yeah, and
nice thing.
that's always the trick, is getting the money where the mouth is thing. But oh
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's so sad because I lived in Oklahoma for a while and I was part of a writing group there. And there were a couple of people in that group. I mean, I had already, like I said, I'd already had one novel published, and like you're like, okay, so maybe I can do this. But when I read what these people were writing, I'm like, okay, I just need to quit. They were so amazing. These young, and they were younger kids, early 20s. But oh my gosh, especially one girl. This girl had like a sci-fi novel you had never seen before. I
Really?
mean, phenomenal. But she was such an introvert and so afraid of
Mm.
rejection, she wouldn't even finish it. We're all begging her. Everybody's begging her. Where's the next chapter? Where's the next chapter? We need to read this. And she never did finish it. And that is so sad that, and I don't blame the industry for that, because it is what it is. And there's a reason why they do what they do. But at the same time, people like her who are so, they're fragile, but not fragile because, they're fragile souls, and anything against that just shuts them down. And I kept telling her, you can't do that in this business. You have to grow thick skin. You just have to.
Yeah, I mean it's writing for sure, but anything really artistic, filmmaking. When we put out our films, um, you know, people online can be awfully cruel, and you just get the nastiest comments, and you got to have a thick skin, or not read that stuff, which I think is perfectly reasonable to do as well. But you know, writing especially comes hand in hand with rejection, and also it's one of those things that everyone just thinks they can do. So people can be extremely um, nasty about it. Everyone kind of thinks they can do better. I, you know, I sometimes I think I can do better when I read stuff. Um, but you have to. I mean, rejection. As I said, I've gone through years and years and years of not being able to sell a script, and I've had plenty of short stories that have been rejected. Some that I love that I've not been able to place, and it's just. I mean, I think it helps to be a little older, so you kind of you've got a bit of a thicker skin. But boy, it's all about rejection, and then
Yeah, I
fighting through
mean,
it.
that's to be expected. Well, even Stephen King, he had a big old nail in his wall, and it was so full that he had to
Right.
get another one. Rejections happen, but I think when that happens, at least for me, it made me go back and rewrite and learn and
Yeah.
watch movies, read books, figure out what it is, where are my weaknesses. So, rejections aren't always bad, and we need to take them as a lesson and not a personal thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. When one of my scripts, this was probably about a year ago, I wrote a horror comedy script. I won't bore you with the details, but it was called Jingle Bell Chop, and it was like a holiday horror thing, and I loved it, and I was really proud of it, and I queried some managers, and I sent it to some production companies, and this one manager in particular, I knew she was interested in kind of that kind of stuff, and so I queried this manager, and she got back to me with the most effusive praise. She went on and on about how I love the characters and the situations, and oh my God, this is so funny, and the writing is so crisp, and I mean, she was just going on and on, and she said, "This is exactly the kind of thing I want to represent." And like then the last line was, "But I don't think it's a good fit, so I'll best of luck to you." And I was like, I don't know if that's better or if I hate your work is better, because I just was like, wait, what you just said, this is exactly what you want to represent. So as I said
And
earlier with my agent search, you just get someone on the right day or the wrong day, you just never know.
yeah, and there's a lot of doublespeak. A lot, they're talking out of their mouth all the time. I went to a writing conference. It was a while ago. And have you ever been to one?
Not really, no, nothing
Okay.
formal.
I mean, they're really good. You learn a lot and it's a good experience. However, there's a part where you can sign up, where you can practice pitching,
Oh yeah.
your all this other stuff to people. Unfortunately, I got stuck with someone who was emphatic. In fact, the thing she said right off the bat is, if you have a series, a trilogy, a duology, anything, I don't want it. I'm not interested. And she was the one I was scheduled to pitch to. And I'm like, what? And she goes, don't even talk to me about it. And I'm like, I don't have a choice. I'm going to talk to you about it because at this point, I just didn't care. And so
Absolutely.
and so I practice pitching. Wasn't Mark Leslie? He was there. He was one of the writers there. And so I practice, the other writers that were there were like, hey, if you need to practice. So he's like, sure, I'll practice. So I'm practicing sending the pitch. And he's like, oh my God. He goes, if I was an agent or publisher, I want your book. And he goes, you're gonna get represented. Don't worry about it. They're gonna take you. So later on, he comes walking out. He's like, so did she give you an offer? And I go, nope.
And I knew it before
what?
I went in.
Yeah. And he goes, what? He goes, you're kidding me. He goes, I said, no, she turned it. In fact, she was really, really angry when I'm like, well, it's a trilogy. I mean, I'm not going to lie to her.
Right, but what are you going to do? You're there, it's not like, yeah, that's...
And it was what it was.
Disappointing.
It was already like I had books 1 and 2 written. I'm just supposed to drop book 2 because she didn't want it. And then she was doing like online type stuff or on like a CD and thing. And I already been that route and I didn't want to do that again. The first book I had published was put on CD books. That's when it was a first thing, a novelty, and nobody had ever really seen books on CD before. And so, but I'm like, I don't want to do that. I've been there, done that, and not happy with the results. But I'm just like, oh, well, life goes on. So now, are you planning on writing more books?
Yes, I definitely am. I'm about, I think I'm three drafts into my next novel, which is another pulp horror novel. It's based on a local Wisconsin kind of a cryptid legend, but it's a pretty threadbare legend. So I've had a lot of opportunity to flesh it out myself, and I had a ton of fun writing it, and so I'm really excited to almost be done. Like I said, I'm about 3 drafts in, but it's starting to take shape, so I'm pretty pleased with it. And then I actually I have a script that I really, really like that I thought would make a good novel, and so as soon as I finish this next one, I'm gonna jump into adapting that script into a more traditional novel.
Oh, that'll be fun. And Matthew says the gaslight rejection letter. Great. Yeah, where they bring you along and then just, okay, psych, wasn't really interested. And you're like, oh, jerk. But seeing
I'm gonna,
now,
I'm gonna let you behind the curtain a little bit. Matt is my former college roommate. He's a good friend of mine. So Matt, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining and supporting him. I'm all for that. Yeah, and Greg, he's a buddy of mine. He was actually part of the Netflix special on the David Crowley case. So that's how I found him. Was I was watching the Netflix show and I saw Greg, and then I found his Facebook page, and so we just kind of joined forces on the Crowley case. But Greg is also a writer, but he does a lot of political books.
Cool.
And I mean, really good. His books are really good. So that's a pitch for you, Greg. You're welcome.
Everyone gets a shout out tonight.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah, it's like, so on your book, you said, how many pages was it again?
So it's about 200 pages long. It's about 54,000 words. So it's a novel, but it's a short novel, and it's a pretty quick. I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, but a beach read. It's basically a beach read. So you can probably knock it off in a couple days. Yeah.
Now, are you gonna? I don't know if they do this for the type of horror novels that you've written, but are you gonna do like an audiobook or try to get it done in audiobook form?
Yeah. Just excuse me, maybe about a month ago, signed a deal with I think what are they called, MMB Vibrance, to do the audiobook. They're an audio publisher. Was really excited about that. got actually for whatever reason we got a lot of interest in the audiobook, and my agent kind of set up a little bidding war, which was nice.
Well,
And
audiobooks are really hot right now. I don't know if you know that. They're
I
like crazy.
I honestly didn't, and without getting into the contract details, I asked my agent. I was like, well, why are we getting these kinds of offers, on the audiobook when we were getting these kinds of offers? And he said, that's where the money is these days. And I had no idea of that. But I was very excited to get a good, well-established audiobook producer to do the audiobook. And um, I think we're expecting it to be in August sometime that the audiobook's released.
Okay, let's see. So Matthew says, so do the Lyme disease bacterium what Borrelia?
Yes.
Okay, dude, not funny.
Yes.
Bergdorferi also become giant along with the tick. Oh, that's what you have on the book. Don't you have those books?
My giant ticks more chop you in half and and they spear you in the chest. And there's not a lot of disease that goes along with
And
my
then maybe
ticks.
the
You die.
bacterium will fill in
Yeah.
where the points are.
You die pretty quickly with my ticks.
It's like kidding. When you do smaller words, it's too late. And then pronounce tongue twisters like I can't do it. Oh, that's sad. But oh my God. When is your book out? We need to let people know that.
Sure. So the book is being released in Kindle and paperback on next Tuesday, a week from today, on June 24th. So I'm in the final days countdown. Getting real psyched about that. For people kind of in the general area here, in and around Madison, Wisconsin, I'm having a book launch event on the next Saturday the 28th. What I'm going to be doing is hosting a big screening of the 1954 movie Them at our local Marcus Theater. It's called the Marcus Palace Cinema, and we'll be hosting a screening of the movie at 4:30 on Saturday the 28th. It'll be introduced by kind of our top culture critic here in Madison. His name is Rob Thomas. He's going to introduce the movie. And then after the screening, there will be a book signing and a reception in the lounge. They have a nice bar and food area at the theater. So it'll be a nice event. And what's a little bit unique about it is that your ticket to get into the event is a paperback copy of TikTok. So if you come in with a paperback copy, you get into the screening free. It's going to be, we've got it in several starting next Tuesday, it'll be in several brick and mortar local bookstores. You can get it. People can certainly order it from Amazon. It'll be there in time. And then we'll sell some at the event if people weren't able to get them ahead of time. But basically, it's a free screening with the book, and then anyone can come to the book signing and the party afterwards. So I'm really excited about that. I thought it was kind of a fun, unique way to launch the book, along with a movie that was so inspirational to kind of what I was going after. So I'm super excited about that.
Oh, I would be too if I were you. So in the brick and mortar stores, are they just local, or are you talking national brick and mortar?
Well, there'll be a handful of stores here in Wisconsin, or here in Madison. I've got placement in several other bookstores around Wisconsin. I'm keeping a running list on my website. Mm-hmm. I've been relatively proactive of trying to identify independent bookstores and ones that might, starting in Wisconsin and then starting to branch outward that might be interested. And so I've been reaching out to folks. I had a great experience about 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. I found this indie bookstore in Chicago called Bucket of Blood, and it's a very horror themed store. And so I reached out to them and I said, hey, here's some information about my book. It's coming out on June 24th. And the owner wrote me back and said, oh no, yeah, we pre-ordered this book 2 weeks ago, so we're already stocking it. So that was just superb. I was so thrilled. So I'm hoping there's more of that, though. In the indie space, I don't think there's a lot of that. But there's a store in San Francisco that confirmed that they want to keep it in their store. Um, Matt, who's on the live stream, he helped me get placement in a Brooklyn bookstore. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
So I'm gonna keep pushing that, and I'm gonna keep. I think the cover art is really eye catching, and I think it's good for browsing. I think it's the kind of thing that kind of jumps off the shelf. I also have been extremely thrilled to get. I got endorsements and blurbs from one of the legendary horror authors, Ramsey Campbell. For some reason, agreed to read the book and gave me just a very glowing a blurb, which is on the back of the book. So again, for the bookstores, you pick it up, you like the cover, you turn it over, and suddenly Ramsey Campbell, who's
Yeah.
among the top 3 or 4 horror writers of the last 3 decades, is on there. And in fact, he, ironically, even though it was unsolicited, I didn't tell him that the book was inspired by Night of the Crabs, but he, in his blurb, he says, boy, if this keeps the Guyan Smith, who's the author of Night of the Crabs, keeps the Guyan Smith tradition alive. So I love that. It was like he wrote exactly what I would have given him, to write. So he gave me a nice blurb. There's an author named Sean Hudson, who was a huge pulp horror author in the 70s and 80s. He's known as the British godfather of gore. He gave me a nice blurb, agreed to read the book and gave me a nice blurb. So I've been thrilled. But all that just to say that for the bookstores that pick it up, I think it kind of it's a nice little marketing package. The book itself, the art, the blurbs. I hope that the bookstores that do get it will have trouble keeping it on the shelves.
Oh, I bet it will. I mean, it's what. Okay, speak English. One day this will happen. Um, the cover art is so important. You need something that's going to catch the eye. And what I like about your cover art is not only is it going to appeal to even younger children, just because of you got the tick and you got the man and the woman and they're running and you got the little viruses or bacterium, sorry, and so it's very eye catching for children, but then it's also going to be very eye catching for like the older generation. They're going to go, oh, we used to read books like this, and it's
Right.
going to catch their eye and they're going to pick it up. So I think your cover art is like dead on, it's spot on.
Well, I appreciate that, and like I said, I was just so happy with it. I will say, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that um, it's nostalgic, but it's also kind of fun. It's kind of broad. But one of the things that I like most about the cover art is when you look at that cover, you know what kind of book you're going to get, and
Yeah.
it is exactly what the book is. I mean, there's no confusion about what you're going to be reading. It's not a bait and switch. What you see on the cover, that's what you're getting in the book, and hopefully in the long term that pays off.
Oh, I think it will. So, like I said, I
We'll
can't.
see.
Now, are you doing pre-orders on Amazon, or does Amazon automatically do pre-orders?
Yeah, it's available now for pre-order in Kindle and paperback. It's available for pre-order on Barnes and Noble, and so that's certainly something that people can do tonight if they want to go pick up a copy of the book. I when I was talking, over the last several months, I talked to PR people and thought about hiring someone, but ended up doing most of it myself. One of the PR people suggested to me, she's like, don't push the pre-orders because, think about when you buy a book, unless you know the author and you're a huge fan, you don't want to wait 4 months to, I'm going to order it today and in 4 months I'm going to get it. She's like, you're going to be wasting your time and your effort at the stage that you're at, a first time author and so on. So I haven't really been focusing too much on the pre-orders, but I'll start to push pretty hard once it's available because, like she said, honestly, that's what I would do. I would probably like see, oh, that book looks good, but do I want to wait 3 weeks for it? No, I'm going to get something else, and then I'll come back to that when it's available. But now your viewers should go ahead and order it. They should definitely do it.
Yeah, you guys, everybody watches this, order one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that she said that to you because the advice that I've been hearing from, a lot of even indie authors who are just now starting to, they're really starting to take off. They've written like 15 books and now, they finally wrote a book that became like massive sellers, and well, maybe that's why they're pushing it, but the advice everyone is saying is, make sure you push the pre-orders, make sure you get those, things in, because the algorithm on
Yeah.
Amazon and blah blah blah, and they're not going to push you if you don't have XYZ. And I'm just like, jeepers, gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, that very well might be true. And I think for someone who has somewhat of a readership base and, has a good email list or whatever, um, you know, that probably makes sense. But I think for someone like me, I want to make a big splash on June 24th when it comes out. I want to, give the give the EKG paddles, right to the heart of Amazon and its algorithm on that day and shock it to life. So we'll see. We'll see. I think trying to predict how your book's going to perform or how you can game the system to make it work. The best laid plans of mice and men, right? I mean, you could think you've got the right strategy, and you certainly don't. And so, um, I don't think I talked about this before with you, but when I wrote the book and um, I gave it to my best buddy Jay to read, and I gave it to him and I said, Jay, this is not the kind of book you normally read. Um, I don't know if it's any good. The writing might completely suck, and it might be, it may be that nobody will want to read it. But I realized when it was done, this was exactly the book that I meant to write. It was the tone was exactly what I wanted. The pacing was exactly what I wanted. Everything about it was exactly what I wanted it to be. And you might not like it, and you might not like it, but I'm happy with it, and so I'm thrilled, to have what I set out to write out there. I would love I would love tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to find it and to love it. Um, but if they don't, it's still been a good experience, and I'm going to keep. Now I found out that I really like doing this, and so I'm going to keep writing. And hopefully, my next one, when it's done, it'll be exactly the book I set out to write as well. Because in the end, the best writing advice I ever heard is write the book you want to read. And, that's what I did with the first one. That's what I did with Ticktown. And that's, if I'm not the only one who wants to read it, that'll be a nice treat.
Uh, so, and when you started writing this, did you just
Yeah.
sit down and write and then finish it, or did you like start it a couple of years ago and then finish it later? How long did it
Yeah.
take you?
It didn't, I mean, again, it sounds, whenever someone tells me, like, I have some friends who do script writing, and they're always telling me about how fast they write their scripts. And I often think it's like, well, that's great that you've written it so fast, but does that mean it's any, it might not be any good, speed isn't necessarily,
Right.
a high indication of quality. But I probably started writing this in February or March of 2023. I was done with the first draft probably by October of that year, and then went through another few drafts before January before I felt that it was where I wanted it to be. So the process was less than a year, but again, it's a short book, so it's I don't want to suggest that I don't feel like I write particularly fast. I know a lot of people who write a lot faster, but it was the time that it took me, and it was the time that worked for me, and so you know kind of similar to the other thing. It's like, well, that's good enough. I'd love to write faster. I'd love to put out 2 or 3 books a year, but it's just not how I do it.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do what you can do. I mean, and it's not everybody has like a massive typing skill where they can type super fast. Like, I've typed my entire life, so I type pretty darn quick, super fast.
Yeah,
So
yeah, oh yeah,
I can get stuff out no problem. It's like no big deal. But for me, it's like I tend to procrastinate sometimes. It's like I'll go, oh, I have this great idea. So I'll start writing it down. And when I say procrastinate, I'm talking years. 4 or 5 years later, I go, oh yeah, I started that book, didn't I?
That's procrastination. Yeah.
I'm the queen of it, let
Yeah.
me tell you. Oh
I,
my
I mean,
God.
I type pretty fast, but these, you read writers who like say, oh, I churn out 10,000 words a day. I can't imagine churning out 10,000 words a day. If I did that, I could write a book a week, like the lengths of my books, but it's just, maybe I don't process that fast, or I'm also maybe a little self-critical as I write. So, I slow down, but if someone can do that, more power to them, love it. I just can't. That's not how I do it.
So are you a pantser or are you a planner, a plotter?
I, excuse me, I um, tend to, and with my scripts as well, I'll kind of lay out kind of a threadbare plot. I kind of know what the plot points are. I kind of know where it's going, and then once you get into it, um, it takes turns, and excuse me. So I'm a little bit of both, but I like to have an idea of where I'm going.
And see, and that's something I have a hard time with. The girl that I've buddied up with, and she's a planner, a plotter. I am a pantser. I can sit down and you just say, okay, let's do a story about the moon falling over Mars or something stupid like that. And I'll
Right.
be like, wait, tell me how many words you need, and I'll
Oh,
just
good for
write
you.
it.
That's
Not
amazing.
saying
Yeah.
it's good though, but I will get the words down on paper.
No, that's fantastic. What I learned about writing Ticktown too was, again, I used a lot of the skills that I'd kind of developed writing screenplays, just not only the style, but when I was finished with it, I ended up, or when I was finished with the first draft or the second draft, I made an Excel file with every chapter, and I kind of like put a little note about what happened in the chapter, and I kind of color coded it. Say this is like an exposition kind of thing, and this is suspense, and this is and I kind of looked at it and I said, you know what? I need to restructure this, and I need more action here, and I need this, and I moved stuff around, and then I realized, oh, I didn't really, and that was, to me, that was a great process to go through, because it really gave me a way to kind of get an idea of how people would experience the book, and not know what's coming the way I did when I was rereading it. And I kind of loved that process too. It's fun to get it down, but I really loved then taking the clay you just kind of slap together and start peeling
Start
it
filling it
away
in.
and
Yeah.
moving it around. And I really like that process a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know if you are aware, but NaNoWriMo is no more. But while it was still around, did you ever participate in doing their, was
No,
it 50, 60,000 words in a month?
no, I know. I'm not even familiar with it.
It's national, it's NaNoWriMo, national something. It's a writing month of November. So like the
Okay,
entire month. So from the 1st to the 30th, you spend every day. And if you hit the goal, the whole thing is just to get into the daily habit of writing. And so they set a goal
sure.
and then you try to meet it. And doing that last year is actually what helped me finish like book 2 of my series. But
Oh,
I mean,
fantastic.
it's not happening anymore, which is kind of sad. But it was a fun yearly event. But
What did you say the word count was though? What did you need
I
to do
think it
that
was
month?
50. I think it was 50,000 words, 50 or 60,000. I mean, I surpassed it because it was just like once I got started. I mean, that's just it. If I can sit down and get started, yeah, it's like, oh, all right. I think you have a quota of something like 16, little over 1,600 words a day. And I'm like, that's a piece of cake. although
Good for
though,
you.
no, there are days though when I can't even get out like 200 words. I'm sitting there going, like one day on the novel I had just finished with my friend. I think I wrote, like you're speaking, it was like at least 10, 11,000 words that day, and I'm like, yeah. But we're writing the second book. I couldn't get 200 words on paper. I spent all day staring at the computer, going, I got nothing.
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. I mean, the whole process of writing, it is fascinating. I was, you kind of talk about being blocked or whatever. When I sat down to write Ticktown, I was in the middle of writing the screenplay that I referenced earlier called Jingle Bell Chop, and I was having just the time of my life writing this screenplay. I was totally amusing myself. I'd be laughing out loud at my, I was having a ball. I got about halfway through it, and like literally, I just stopped, and I was in the middle of a scene. I was like halfway in a scene where there was, something was attacking something else, and I just couldn't. I was like, God, I don't know where I should. And I had plotted it out, and I knew where it was going, but it just felt like, geez, this is not something's not feeling right, and it's not. And all this joy I had been taking and writing, it just kind of went away. And I thought, oh, it might be time to like sit down and start working on that novel. And so I put it aside, pulled out Ticktown, and fired away on Ticktown. And then, ironically, when I was done with Ticktown and I had signed with Mark, and we started, he started kind of taking over, as far as like finding publishers and stuff. I was like, oh, I should pull that script out again, and whoop, you just kind of picked it up and off you go. So sometimes you just have to step away. That was stepping away for like a year, but it worked, and whatever works.
Geez, that's amazing. I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like, I'm treading water. It's like
No.
I'm lucky if I'm treading water. Most of the time it's like you're just sinking. But okay, my fault though, because I know that the novels I choose to write, it's not going to be a popular thing. I don't choose popular genres. I mean, I may choose a genre, but I don't follow the path that everybody else writes. I always think of something. I want something different. I want something unique.
Sure, sure. Well, I think it goes back, like I said, I mentioned before. I don't even remember where I heard it or who said it to me or where I read it, but just that idea. Well, you should write the novel you want to read, and at least you're going to have one very satisfied reader, if nothing else.
That's true. Oh my God. How long have we been on here? Gosh, we've been on here an hour already. Holy cow, that goes fast.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, it's super fast. Now, it sounds like you're going to be like really, really busy, but sometime in the future, would you be willing to come back and do a follow up and let us know how things are going?
I would absolutely love to do that. Yeah, but absolutely. And again, it sounds like we're wrapping up, so I just do want to say thank you so much for hosting me. It's sometimes it feels like you're just begging people to kind of give you a platform and let you spread the word, and so I just couldn't be more grateful to be here and have you show an interest. So thanks so much.
Oh, well, and thank you for coming on because, sometimes it's hard for me to put out the offer because so many people will say, "Oh, I need a chance. Can anybody, talk? I've got," and I'm like, I have a small platform, but you're more than, you can come on here and say what you need to say. And then everybody backs out. They're always like backing out at the last minute. And so I'm
See, you
like,
were
really?
testing me. You were testing me when you wrote that when we were communicating. You were like,
We'll
let's
see
see
if
what a
he
kind of a
shows.
jerk this guy is. Yeah.
We'll see if he shows up. But no, I mean and that's sad. That's pretty much how it is. It's just like I just go, okay, are they gonna show? Or are they because I always have backup plans and I'm like going, okay, well, if he doesn't show, I'll just start talking about the David Crowley case, right? Whatever. But no, I'm glad you didn't flake though. It's nice to see that somebody's taking their work seriously because you put a lot of effort into that book. I mean, people don't understand. Well, I mean, those of us, I think, in here, those watching, like I know Greg knows, and and I know it's so much work to put a book together. And it's a labor of love, and it's, love, trauma. It's like they said, blood, sweat, and tears. You put everything into it. And then when people just flake, and you're like, what? I thought that meant something to you, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind
Nope,
of
you're
annoying.
absolutely right.
But and for everybody, just so you know, I've put a link to Christopher's book down in the description, so just go to the description box and expand it and then follow the link and pre-order his book. So i'm it's not I'm not running out of things to say, but my voice is starting to go. When I talk too much, I get hoarse, so I'm like, uh-oh, I feel it going. So I'm like,
No,
yeah.
no. We've been going an hour, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and I would love to come back. You have me back anytime you want.
Okay, I want you to come back, but I want to wait until I'm going to get your book and I want to read it and then I'm going to come back. Give it a little bit of while. Well, how long do you want your book to be out before we start giving spoilers? Like, because when I talk, I'll talk about everything I read. So I don't know
Wow.
if you want spoilers or not.
Interesting question. No, I have not given that even a moment's consideration. So I don't know. I will talk about it offline, because
Okay.
I don't even know what to think about that.
Do you have a website?
I do. I have my website is Christopher Micklos. My name ChristopherMicklos.com. There's links to pre-order the book there. I've got a kind of a nascent. It's a new site, so I've got kind of a nascent blog going there. But I've got some blog posts kind of about the book and about what I've been doing. I've got an events page so people can look at not only the launch that's happening, but I'm starting to schedule book signings and appearances, and so that's all listed on there. I've got links to a lot of my short fiction, kind of where you can read that. Most of it's, sites that people can go to for free, or even the magazines now they're kind of online, and so there's a lot of content there. So I think if someone wants to find out a little bit about me, kind of read some of my work, it's ChristopherMicklos.com.
Cool. And are your book signings, are they going to be mainly in the Madison area?
No, in fact, I haven't scheduled anything in the Madison or the surrounding communities at all yet, because I've got this event, coming up on the 28th. But I've got a couple. I've got a couple few that are scheduled now for other places in Wisconsin. We're not a tiny state, but we're not a huge state, so I'll travel around Wisconsin. I'm trying to do a little tour of Wisconsin, and whoever will have me, I'll go visit. Um, I don't have a date yet, but I mentioned that Chicago bookstore that I was so thrilled about. My wife and my daughter went to Chicago last week to see a show, and so we snuck into a Bucket of Blood, and I introduced myself and talked about doing a signing. So I'll do a signing there at some point, and basically, if if I don't have to fly somewhere, I'll go wherever they'll have me. So I'll make the tour as broad as I can.
Yeah, and even just getting a foot into a big city like Chicago, I mean, that's huge, and
I'd love it. Yeah.
that was actually pretty smart to make that step and to stop into that store. Because I mean, you just never know. You don't know which place is gonna get you that boost to get you going in the right, well, you're in the right direction, but you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
never know if
No.
you're
Yeah.
gonna start selling tens of thousands of books versus hundreds, So
Right.
that would be great. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
that would be. You're right. You're right. That would be great. That would be great.
Well, I mean, you never know. In like around here, and I live in a rather small town, and like Barnes and Noble, they have like this special little section for local area artists. So
Yeah.
which is really cool, was something I really like about Barnes and Noble. But like you said, too, the independent bookstores do the same thing. They have, and they put up little signs, if you're local independent, come on in. And so, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten a very um, warm reception from a lot of local bookstores. A couple, not so much, but not bad. They just, I mean, they get tons and tons of people coming in. So there's a few that I haven't gotten into yet that I still want to get into. You mentioned Barnes and Noble, the local Barnes and Noble. I had a great conversation with their buyer. He was very enthusiastic, um, uh, but their corporate process can take a while. So he wasn't
Correct.
sure if he'd be able to get into the store by the time my event happened. By the time we were able to kind of get him, that it got on Ingram and stuff. So I'm not sure if it'll be in the local Barnes and Nobles or not by the event, but I'm hopeful that it'll be there, in the weeks that follow at the very worst. Um, but I've been really delighted by a lot of these bookstores that I've reached out to, not just in Madison, but elsewhere in Wisconsin. And like I said, some elsewhere that have just been so open to just a first time schmo off the street. Sending them an email and with a little bit of information. I think the cover helps. I think some of the endorsements help, but good for them. I mean, that's really supporting independent authors when you just when someone just kind of cold calls you and you say, yeah, great, I'll order 3 or 4 copies. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and And what really makes me really happy is that um, because it used to be such, a bad thing, and they'd be like bad mojo, bad juju if you were an independent or you're trying to do this by yourself. They, oh, it's an independent artist, you don't, you got to wait for the big five, and that's really all you need. But nowadays it's like they're looking for that. It's like they have little feelers out. We need independent, authors to come on in, and we want to sell your stuff. So I think you're coming out at a really good time with your book.
Well, great, great. From your mouth to the
Yeah,
great
right.
bookstore in the sky's ears. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and Christopher, thank you so much. I'm so glad you weren't a flake. Oh wait, we've got leave it to me. Oh, okay. I think you do a great job. Okay, that's my brother. He's over
Okay.
here writing. He's leaving notes. Thank
Nice.
you. Love you.
Yeah,
He's a good
thanks for
brother.
tuning in.
And let's see. Oh, hey, Akam, how are you doing? Only 4 likes. That's it. Oh, come on. Yeah, I know, but that's how it goes with this video. I know. I don't, it's like my earlier videos before I started talking about topics that YouTube didn't like about. I would get 35,000 views would be roughly the average. And now if I can get, they just are just but I'm like, I'm not going to give up. It's like, I'll just keep going. I don't care.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then my
Every
brother,
every
oh,
person you reach is a person.
that's true. So my brother's asking, what genre are your book? He didn't hear the whole thing. So what genre do you write again for those who missed out?
So it's horror. I mean, the books are horror, and specifically, I read pulp horror, but just horror generally. So if you these bookstores that I'll be in, I'm sure I'll be in the local section, but otherwise, you can find me in horror and specifics either pulp fiction, pulp horror, or creature feature. Because Ticktown is very much a creature feature.
I love creature features. I just think they're,
I
I
know.
can't wait to read it. Seriously, I just
Yeah.
can't. It's going to be awesome. But
Well,
okay,
thanks.
before I go completely hoarse, again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you everybody for listening and joining in on the conversations. All of you in the chat, I appreciate you very much. So you all have a good day. And any last words you want to say before we go?
Just, just thank you. Just thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.